We used to be able to tell someone and not start to cry.
By 15 months, I was pretty convinced that that's what we were looking at was autism.
And something many people don't know enough about.
A friend mentioned the word autism to me, and I thought that was somebody who really didn't talk.
Maybe it's because I'm a stay-at-home mom, and he needs to be in socially with other kids, and maybe it's my problem.
The statistics don't lie.
Yeah, we were scared. Yeah, we were scared.
You go through the grieving process. There's denial, and there's anger, and there's depression, and finally you get to acceptance.
Autism is now an epidemic.
Good evening. I'm Jen Christensen with HOI 19 News.
And I'm Steve Thompson, president of Easter Seals in Central Illinois. We're teaming with HOI 19 News to bring you important information about what we're calling an epidemic among young children across the country, and right here in the heart of Illinois, the epidemic of autism.
Autism is something no parent, grandparent, or caregiver can ignore. It can happen to any family. There is no known single cause and no known cure. During the next half hour, we'll show you what autism is, look at the signs and symptoms, discuss the controversial topic of potential causes, and let you know how it's treated.
Now, this information isn't meant to scare you. Rather, understanding more about autism and knowing what early warning signs to look for and seeking help early can make all the difference in the life of a child with autism.
We begin tonight with the numbers. What are the chances of your child or someone you know having autism? 1 in every 150 kids has autism. Boys are 4 times more likely than girls to have it.
Autism knows no boundaries. It strikes across every race, every socioeconomic status, every town. But autism is treatable. Kids with autism are capable of making significant progress, and many go on to lead meaningful, independent, and productive lives as adults.
That's why we set out to let more parents know the warning signs, because early detection is key. There are several different types of autism, but all of them share at least 2 characteristics. Kids with autism have a hard time interacting with other people, and they have trouble with verbal and nonverbal communication. Severe cases of autism are fairly easy to spot, but the milder forms are just now getting a lot of attention. This is Taylor Brower. She dumps out her bin of farm animals just like any other toddler. Even sings Old MacDonald Had a Farm.
Give her a kiss.
And gives her animals kisses.
All right. High five on the kiss. She knows all of her ABCs and all of the sounds they make, her numbers, her letters, her shapes, all that stuff. Circle.
But Mama Alyssa recently learned that Taylor is not typical.
The big red flag was the no pointing and the gesturing.
We'll do music. It'll be fun.
Just before her 3rd birthday, Taylor was diagnosed with autism.
When he said high-functioning autism, I thought, I was like the walls were closing in on me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. It is such a big word, I guess, a strong word. It has a lot of connotations with it, and it was hard to hear it, in reference to my child.
So what comes to mind when you hear the word autism? Rain Man is what most people say.
Rain Man had really high skills in some areas and really low skills in others, which is a great demonstration of what autism can look like.
However, every child with autism is different. Only 10% have savant characteristics like Rain Man.
I can say when I started out in 1984, the prevalence rate was around 1 in 10,000. So we're seeing a significant increase in that prevalence.
Now 1 in 150 kids is diagnosed. The definition of autism hasn't changed, but they are getting better at identifying it in its milder forms and earlier. This is what people mean when they say their child is on the autism spectrum. Autism is the main disorder, but there are 4 conditions that share characteristics but have slightly different definitions. All of the spectrum disorders can range from mild to severe.
I really trust parents' intuition, and I think parents often kind of have a suspicion.
For about a year, I really had my suspicions, but because she's affectionate, she makes decent eye contact, I just thought, okay, maybe, maybe not.
Alyssa is certainly not alone.
Can you give me a kiss?
She is like hundreds of other parents who are trying to cope with the epidemic of autism. Right now, autism is typically diagnosed between 3 to 4 years old, but experts say it can be diagnosed as early as 12 months old in some kids. And research shows the earlier treatment starts, the better the result. So what are the symptoms of autism? What are we looking for? Here are some signs to keep in mind.
When they were supposed to, or cooing, they couldn't take a bottle very well, couldn't breastfeed.
By the time children are 8 to 10 to 12 months, they're actually quite social. And they're playing games like peekaboo, or when you go up to them and you hold your hands out like this, they raise up and they're ready to get picked up.
Lacking eye contact is something that's a major thing.
He wasn't sitting up. He was very, very late to walk. He never pointed, and he was very, very late to speak.
She has a cousin who is a month younger. When we saw him at that Christmas, there was a huge difference. He was pointing and gesturing and talking, like showing people things that he liked, and she was doing none of that.
He didn't respond to his name. Typically, you call a 2-year-old by their name and they respond.
He could count way beyond 100, at 20 months old, and just memorize things, but yet he couldn't look us in the eye and tell us anything.
We were waiting and waiting, thinking, oh, one day, he was just going to start speaking.
She will hug other kids and play maybe near them, but not necessarily interact with them.
About the first 6 months, he developed normally. He was sitting up on time, rolling over on time, and by about a year old, all of the mama, dada, all those things had disappeared, and we were noticing he didn't like to be held.
Do people with autism gain skills and then lose them? And the answer to that is about half do. Now, why that happens, we don't really know.
He would run around the house with his hand like this. What would you call it, the hand dance? I think, and he would go, ah, like that. And he would run laps around the house like that.
We said, how are you doing today, Kevin? His response would be, how are you doing today, Kevin? Young children might line up toys or organize things a certain way.
If you have a child that's not socially responsive, when you hold your hands up or when you point, they just don't respond. They don't look at your face, and their speech is a little delayed. Now you have a collection of symptoms that are clustered together, and you say, ooh, we got to pay attention to this.
The diagnosis process is tricky. There's no blood test or brain scan to determine autism. That's where Easter Seals comes in.
First, parents can call Easter Seals for a free developmental screening. If further testing is warranted, the child will be referred for a more in-depth evaluation. If a developmental delay is discovered, treatment can begin immediately. Easter Seals offers physical, occupational, speech, and developmental therapy. If autism is suspected, the child will be put on a waiting list for Easter Seals Diagnostic Clinic. The child will be evaluated by several experts, including a psychologist and a pediatrician.
Steve, if the kids are already getting the treatment that they need, why do they need that label, that diagnosis of autism?
The diagnosis really helps the family gain a clear sense of direction for the future and often provides better access to additional services and supports. But most importantly, I think it helps a family to prepare their child for an appropriate school placement.
And right now, the diagnosis can take several months. Is there any hope of getting that speeded up in the near future?
The waiting list is currently several months, as you point out, and because it's difficult to predict the growing demand for diagnostic services, I think families can expect to see that 2-month to 3-month wait going forward. Watching this program, you may find yourself having questions about autism, how to schedule your child for a free screening, or you may simply be wondering, how can I help? Just call Easter Seals at the number posted on your screen, and we will give you all the information you need.
The big question surrounding autism is what causes it. No one really knows the answer to that question, but there are a lot of theories. The one topic that continues to come up is whether mercury that used to be found in many childhood vaccinations led to autism in some kids. According to the National Network for Immunizations, most childhood vaccines quit containing thimerosal, which is a preservative made up of 50% mercury, by 2003. But thimerosal is still in most flu shots. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recently determined there is no link between mercury in immunizations and the increased rate of autism. However, we sat down with a group of parents who disagree. They believe their kids were poisoned by mercury.
5 families, 5 children with autism, all think the big public health organizations were wrong when they came out saying there is no link between mercury in immunization shots and autism.
I think it's ridiculous because there's an abundance of lab and clinical science linking thimerosal to the autism epidemic.
Other countries, including Russia, actually took it off before we took it off. So other countries were even aware of the risk neurologically for the kids, but for some reason our country kept it.
There was a lot of concerns that they wanted people vaccinated, and they were afraid if concerns are raised that people wouldn't get vaccinated. So there's some concern nationwide that some degree of cover-up may have occurred during this whole thimerosal epidemic of autism.
So why isn't there a study that proves there is a link between mercury and autism?
The problem is you can't, because it's just medically, I happen to be a medical doctor, and because it's such a rare event, 1 out of every 500 kids gets it roughly, and the size of the study you'd need to confirm that would be enormous, millions and millions of kids. So you just can't do it.
These parents point to mercury in immunizations as a major cause, but also feel their kids were exposed through more than just vaccinations, through things like metal dental fillings in pregnant women and high levels of mercury in some seafood, or even just the air we breathe.
In Chicago, the EPA has actually measured rainfall with mercury in it that's 70 times the acceptable level.
Do you feel that the shots are safer now?
They're somewhat safer.
But there's ongoing concerns because the number of vaccinations that children receive are much higher than they were previously, and they're given at an early age, so they still need to be monitored.
We also market the flu vaccine to our infants and our pregnant mothers, and that is still laced with the thimerosal.
It's alarming to all parents to think there's something we could be doing that's making our kids more susceptible to autism, but not everyone thinks that's the case. We talked to 2 autism experts who have very differing views on the causes of autism.
Dr. Anju Usman is a family practitioner in Naperville who has been treating kids with autism for 10 years. Dr. Bennett Leventhal is a professor at the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago. He has spent the last 40 years doing research and clinical work with autism. Dr. Usman believes some kids have a genetic predisposition to autism that can be triggered by several things in the environment. Dr. Leventhal believes the cause of autism is solely genetic.
If this is just a genetic disorder, then why has it increased so much from 1 in 10,000 20 years ago to 1 in 150 now?
What accounts for that change? Do more people have the disease, or have we just been identifying more children? And I think there's more than ample evidence to suggest that the latter is the case, that we're now defining children with Asperger's, who used to just be thought of as weird kids, or children with PDD, NOS, pervasive developmental not otherwise specified, where they were just being classified as mentally retarded.
Doctors on the other side of this argument point to identical twins with autism. They say it would be genetically impossible for one identical twin to have autism and not the other. And there are a number of cases where that has happened.
Historically, we used to think that it's a genetic condition and that it's purely genetic. But now we're dealing with an epidemic of autism. We also know there's no such thing as a genetic epidemic.
Dr. Usman believes autism is a symptom caused by other medical conditions, including heavy metal toxicity, like the mercury concerns our panel of parents were talking about. She also thinks gastrointestinal illnesses could play a role.
We're not there yet to say mercury causes autism, or GI problems cause autism, or measles cause autism. We're not there with our research yet. But what we can do right now is help the kids in this moment.
She says treatments like chelation, vitamin therapy, and diet changes have shown a complete turnaround in about 10% of her patients and measurable improvements in 80%. Dr. Leventhal believes some of the alternative therapies used for autism are dangerous and irresponsible.
So chelation? No. Secretin? No. There are other treatments that I just don't think make sense. Vitamin therapies? No. There's no evidence that they work. And I'm not going to waste the parents' time and money doing that.
What do you say to the parents who think that they've done chelation or some of these other alternative treatments and they've said, it was a miracle, my child does not act like they're autistic anymore?
Well, first of all, I've seen some of those kids, and some of them still look like they have autism. And some of them don't, but then I've seen videos of them and didn't look like they had autism before they started the treatment.
Now you've heard of many of the suspected causes of autism and those controversial theories, but the burning question remains for us parents. Should we get our kids immunized, or should we avoid the immunizations altogether? Which is riskier? every mainstream public health organization says no question immunizations are a must. We talked to an infectious disease expert at Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago to find out why.
I think that parents need to know they're putting their kids at much greater risk by not vaccinating them by far than they would be putting them at some theoretical risk, which appears not even to be valid. It's been shown clearly in other parts of the world primarily that when a society stops vaccinating, the disease will emerge.
Many parents still have fears about giving their children the live viruses, measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox. They're typically given between 12 and 18 months, and that's also the same time period when autistic symptoms are first noticed by parents. You can hear Dr. Schulman's response to the safety of live viruses and the rest of my interview with him on our website, hoinews.com. The subject of mercury contamination and immunization safety has got to come up a lot at Easter Seals. What do you tell parents?
We refer them to the Centers for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics, both of which do not believe there is enough scientific evidence at this time linking directly vaccinations with autism. And while research is ongoing in this area, at Easter Seals our focus is on helping those living with autism now.
If you would like to talk to someone right after this newscast from Easter Seals about any of your concerns, call the number on your screen, 309-686-1177. Living with autism is an everyday challenge. Parents of kids on the autism spectrum struggle with tasks many of us don't think twice about. HOI 19's Tim McGinnis is joining us now with the story of a Bloomington family who says everyday outings are a real struggle.
Imagine everywhere you go with your child, he or she misbehaves to the point where others begin to stare or even make comments about your parenting. Chris and Tony Boyd experience that just about every time they leave the house. But they want people to know they're not bad parents, and their son is certainly not a bad child.
Something most of us consider routine can be a frustrating day at the store for Tony and Chris Boyd.
More, what's the best way to put it, challenging to do just everyday things.
Matthew Boyd has autism, and though he looks like a normal 3-year-old, he's not.
We never know how long we're actually going to be able to stay away from the house.
Matthew has a tough time being around other people, particularly people he doesn't know, and that's what makes shopping tough and regular school or daycare out of the question.
With it being a social disorder, any social setting is difficult for him. Anything out of his ordinary is hard. So when we get into stores and it's a lot of people and a lot of movement and a lot of change for him, he just has trouble adjusting to that.
On the day we followed Tony, Chris, Matthew, and their other 2 sons, Josh and Michael, Matthew became upset several times. But Chris and Tony say this was a good day.
There was a couple times in the store we had to explain to him that he couldn't have something he wanted, and I think a lot of people assume he's just spoiled. You know, he's just used to getting everything he wants, and that's not the case. He just
doesn't understand.
Right.
Of course, a shopping trip isn't their only challenge. Look at Matthew's hair. Tony and Chris don't like it this long, but they say they really don't have a choice.
Matthew doesn't like anyone being in his space, and unfortunately, get your hair cut, they have to be really in your space, and he won't allow anyone to get close enough, even us, to cut his hair.
The Boyds want people to know that Matthew's not a bad kid. He's just dealing with a disorder that cripples his ability to behave like other children his age.
What's the toughest part of going through this as a parent?
Looking at him and not knowing what his future holds. The specialist we've seen can't tell us what the future holds for him.
Living with Matthew's autism isn't tough for just Tony and Chris. Their other boys have had to learn to adjust to it as well. They say at first it was hard to accept, but in time they've learned to live with Matthew's condition and be a big help to their mom and dad. The American Autism Society recommends explaining autism to other children in the house. They say do it early and do it often. They also say you should help other brothers or sisters form a relationship with your autistic child. Also, schedule some time alone with other children. Some children say it's frustrating having to do everything with an autistic sibling.
If you have a child on the autism spectrum, there is hope. Many kids who are treated early show great improvements by the time they're in 1st grade. Remember 3-year-old Taylor Brower? She's been in therapy for just 1 year, and she is making great strides.
Therapy for kids with autism can often be trial and error.
Taylor loves to comes running down the hall when she's ready to go.
But Taylor has found her niche. When she first started speech therapy, she was using very few words and was hard to understand.
Luke, what number is that?
What number?
3. 3. Okay.
Now Taylor is putting together phrases and sentences. A lot of it is from scripting kinds of things that she likes.
Taylor now memorizes lines from a TV show or a famous saying to let her mom know what she wants.
We have seen amazing progress, even within the last week with a few new things we've started. It's been amazing. So I have very high hopes for her future.
Many kids on the autism spectrum have sensory issues.
Taylor, whose turn is it?
Taylor may hear someone calling her name and hear a faucet dripping and have a hard time deciding which sound is more important. Therapy has helped her make that distinction. Transitioning from one thing to another can cause inconsolable tantrums in many kids with autism. That's where this visual picture board comes in.
And then we're going to eat and play.
Taylor's mom can avoid a tantrum by showing her daughter what's about to happen. Another tactic that works for Taylor is therapeutic listening. She has certain CDs that keep her calm when she would otherwise be overstimulated. Here's the true test to show her treatment is working.
We went to Disney World a month and a half ago, and I thought, oh, this could be really scary.
But believe it or not, it wasn't. That's because the Browers planned ahead. They took the listening device, showed Taylor pictures of Disney characters ahead of time, and wrote a letter asking permission for Taylor to go to the front of lines. This scrapbook picture says it all. Remember when Taylor's mom first suspected a developmental delay?
The big red flag was the no pointing and the gesturing.
Here, Taylor is not only pointing at Minnie Mouse, but she said her first sentence. Look, Mom, there's Minnie.
6 months ago, I can't imagine it, but she really has come far.
There may not be a cure for autism, but Taylor is proof therapy can bring great success.
Taylor's treatment is referred to as behavioral therapy, but that's not the only option for treating autism. We also mentioned some alternative and somewhat controversial options earlier in the broadcast that can be combined with behavioral therapy. And Steve, Easterseals now has an autism resource center in Peoria where people can get information on all the treatments available.
Even after the initiation of treatment and even after a formal diagnosis, families still need a place to go where they can get trusted information on the most effective treatments and to find the tools they need to help their child. Parents will find books, DVDs, home teaching kits, as well as information on treatment options. Perhaps most importantly, the center includes a trained professional ready to give advice, instruction, encouragement, and support to families living with autism.
You've heard throughout this broadcast a wide range of opinions surrounding autism, and because of all those differing opinions, a lot of the support groups were also segregated, but I understand that that's getting a whole lot better in our area.
Most recently, there's been a new chapter of the Autism Society of America formed here in Peoria, the Peoria Regional Chapter, and this brings all of those fragmented groups under one umbrella.
Easterseals is the largest provider of services to people with autism in the country. If you're questioning the behavior of your child or someone you know, Easterseals is standing by right now to answer your questions. Just call 309-686-1177 to talk to someone about your concerns or to make a donation to Easterseals Autism Diagnostic Clinic. You can also set up a time to have your child screened for free. And remember, you can get more information about autism by visiting our website, hoinews.com. We are live at Easterseals in Peoria right now, awaiting your phone calls.
We have professionals right here at Easterseals manning the phones, ready to take your calls to answer any questions that you have about autism, to schedule your child for a free developmental screening, or if you'd like to help, to take your donation.
And also, we are joined now by Erin Rogers, who is the Vice President of Program Services for Easterseals. Erin, because autism is so prevalent right now, there are a lot of new programs, new things for people who have autistic kids that they can do. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. We're fortunate in our community to have a number of family support opportunities for families who have kids with autism. In McLean County, the Autism Society of McLean County has been active for the last 5 years. And throughout that time, they have developed a number of programs, including art opportunities, basketball, baseball, which HOI just featured this evening, and they also have offered movie nights for kids and families. And the movie theaters who've partnered with the group have lowered the lights, raise the lights and decrease the sound so that the kids can cope better with that movie experience. Locally here, we have the Peoria Regional Chapter of the Autism Society of America that's recently been formed, and we're real excited about the fact that we now have an ASA chapter right here in Peoria.
So this is something that these services could broaden to Peoria too, because from what I've heard, the people I've talked to, McLean County has a whole lot more right now than Peoria does for these kinds of services.
They just got an earlier start, I suspect.
Okay.
And the Autism Societies are really there to serve families and kids living with autism. And so we're very fortunate, I feel, to have such resources right here in Central Illinois.
All right, Erin, thank you so much. Steve, we spoke earlier about these phone calls that people are already starting to answer. This isn't just for parents who are concerned about their kids.
There may be people watching the show tonight who are grandparents, and perhaps they have a concern about their grandchild, but have been reluctant to say anything. We would encourage grandparents, call, ask questions, and perhaps we can direct them as to next steps.
And we want to again give you that phone number. It is 309-686-1177. You can call right now.
And we hope this special has helped viewers better understand the epidemic of autism.
Have a great night.
HOI 19 News.